as chairman of the Education and Health Committee, I am here to kick off the press conference in opposition to the action of the State Board of Education. Earlier this month, Senator Scott Surov stated, and I quote, "This governor has already revoked about 8 years of equity policy that was done between the Governor McCullough and the Governor Northam administration, and from what we have been able to tell, equity is just a bad word to this governor and anybody associated with him. This week, the State Board of Education, which is now controlled by Youngkin's appointees, voted no to approval of the newly revised K-12 history standards, albeit they are not historians, and this administration is sadly mistaken if they think we're going to sit on our hands and allow this to happen. Over the last 2 years, dozens of objective historians, national experts in American history, and thousands of Virginians worked hard to revise these standards because old standards were inaccurate, incomplete, and completely whitewashed. The new standards, on the other hand, are a drastic improvement where our children can finally get the full perspective of American history. Atif Kwani, former State Secretary of Education under Governor Northam, told BPM News that one of the main goals of the revision was to get students to more fully understand the why of historical events and become better critical thinkers, not just memorize facts. Notwithstanding, Governor Youngkin wants to stonewall the process to adopt the standards. Not only is he overstepping his constitutional authority, but his attempt to whitewash history is just another example of a long and growing list of attacks on public education by this administration. Numerous historians who have nothing to do with politics work tirelessly in producing high-quality standards so our children can benefit. Therefore, these standards must not be whitewashed and they will not be watered down. We demand that the State Board of Education honor its constitutional obligations and adopt these standards immediately. Now I would like to turn the mic over to the distinguished chairwoman of the Senate Subcommittee on Higher Education, Senator Locke, the senator from Hampton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Senator Lucas. By legislation, the General Assembly created a culturally relevant and inclusive education practices work group that spent a year examining various concepts and made official recommendations for the history and social studies curriculum. This group included a broad range of stakeholders: superintendents, teachers, parents, students, content experts, and public input. The Youngkin administration, which clearly has a problem with the terminology, equity, inclusion, and culturally relevance, has ignored this work. 2 legislative members of the work group, Senator Jennifer Boysko and Delegate Skylar Van Valkenburg, formally asked for the report to be released and received no response. This report has not been entered into the record, which is required by law. Instead, what we get is the removal of 3 highly qualified members of the Board of Education who never had an opportunity to serve their terms, to be replaced by individuals who are following the right-wing agenda of whitewashing Virginia's history, using the excuse of there are errors of not calling George Washington father of the country and Madison father of the Constitution, to delay adopting the report. We have the governor and the attorney general, neither of whom is a historian, teacher, or social studies expert, decrying the report and claiming that we want to teach all of Virginia's history, the good and the bad, yet neither utters the words racism, slavery, massive resistance, Jim Crow, or anything that makes a minority of the population feel uncomfortable. That has been the purpose of the Day One game plan. Globalize the word parents, when in reality we are only talking about a few people who are so-called outraged parents. Parents like the perennial Fairfax County School Board critic, who is appointed to the Board of Education to become the board's gadfly. Other appointees are wedded to privatizing education rather than being committed to public education, substituting propaganda for education. The governor, his Secretary of Education, his Superintendent of Public Instruction, and appointees to the board delayed the report because they are more interested in updating the reality of history They're not interested in updating the reality of history, but banning and banishing any and everything that does not support their ideological game plan. Be assured, this update will not include any reference to January 6th and efforts to destroy this democracy, or reference to the twice impeached president, the history of racism in Virginia, and Virginia as the home of Robert E. Lee, who led the traitorous insurrection against the United States. This would not be included because someone might be outraged and offended by the truth. So let's delay the report until the conservative board majority and out-of-touch superintendent of public instruction can figure out how to whitewash the truth. Oh, but the administration wants to tell all of Virginia's history, correct? No. Instead, this administration wants right-wing think tanks like the Fordham Institute to guide education policy. It wants a graduate of the Heritage Foundation to guide state diversity policy. It wants an individual on the UVA board who was appointed to the UVA board who decided when he was a student, as a UVA student, to invite eugenics supporter William Shockton to campus during Black Culture Week to draw white attention to the week. This administration has attacked public education from day one, with its focus on inherently divisive concepts, Big Brother watching tip line, cherry-picking facts that misrepresent student achievement, and ignores the fact that Virginia's public schools are ranked 4th in the nation. The governor's claim to wanting to work together rings hollow. Senate Democrats will ensure the integrity of Virginia's public schools and not allow this administration to devalue our teachers, students, or undermine the curriculum. We will not engage in alternative facts or devalue history simply because we don't like it. Facts are facts. Truth is truth. Reality is reality. We will ensure that this reality makes it to our classrooms. I'll now ask the chair of the Public Education Subcommittee, Senator Ghazala Hashmi, to bring remarks.
Well, good afternoon, and I just want to thank Senator Lucas and Senator Locke for their very, very powerful words and their expression of why it is so critical that we move forward with the pursuit of our new standards in history and social science. I want to reiterate, the Virginia Department of Education has had the proposed revised 2022 History and Social Studies, Social Science Standards of Learning for 7 months already. The superintendent recently mentioned that VDOE needs more time to edit the document. Well, these issues of spelling and surface editing are the responsibility of department staff, and these should have been easily made several weeks ago. If surface editing issues are really what's behind the delay, then I question what has VDOE been doing all these long summer months. But it's laughable, actually, that these are the excuses that are now being presented to the public. These efforts are an attempt to divert attention away from what I suspect is the real intentionality of the delay, and that is to revise the standards through the specific lens of the Youngkin administration, its corporate partners, and its special interest groups. Their intentionality is to whitewash our history books and to not allow for a more full representation of the rich diversity that is a part of our American heritage and history. Just this week, as a part of the announced delay, Superintendent Balo shared that she has asked the Fordham Institute to review the recommended changes and that they have identified some issues that should be addressed. Well, the Fordham Institute is a conservative think tank whose mission is, as it states, to serve as a model charter school authorizer and to share its lessons throughout and beyond Ohio. So some of the questions we must ask are, what is the purpose of adding the Fordham Institute at this post-midnight hour when the work of developing our standards is already complete? What can the Ford Institute possibly add as a non-Virginia-based institution? What can it possibly recommend When the standards have been developed and vetted by nationally esteemed scholars and historians such as Virginia's own Dr. Ed Ayers, and who was consulted prior to the engagement of the Fordham Institute. The process of developing our revised standards has already received more than 5,000 comments from experts and the public, more than enough information and input to revise the curriculum appropriately. The Board of Education launched this review process of history and social science standards nearly 2 years ago. And the board, along with a committee of curriculum leaders and higher education faculty members, met repeatedly to discuss the revision of the standards. So we agree with the president of the school board, Dan Gecker, who's argued that the board, including its newest members, has had enough time to review the revised standards and that the board should move forward as agreed to in the timeline that was presented. The public is ready to review these changes. Our schools and our teachers are ready to begin that process of implementation. We have to go forward. Thank you, and I think we'll take a few questions.
Yeah, so if everyone would like to come up, so we can get some inclusive photos, and then we can roll questions. Questions? Yeah. Any questions? Feeling quiet? All right. Got all your info? Great. I'll have the recording available and a press release soon as I get it uploaded. And thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Can I get a picture with you? Sure.